The first sign that something extraordinary was about to happen came not from the telescopes or the advanced radar systems that humanity had placed in orbit around Earth. It came from the birds. Across the planet, from Tokyo to New York, from Sao Paulo to Berlin, birds stopped singing and flew upward in massive clouds, as if answering some invisible call from the heavens. The animals sensed it before the machines did. They sensed that something was coming. Captain Lisa Morrison was working late at Kepler Station when her sensors finally picked up the signal. The station orbited Earth at a distance of 400 kilometers, far enough away to see the whole planet but close enough to feel connected to it. Lisa had been a pilot before she became a captain, and she had learned to trust her instincts. Something about this signal felt different from anything she had ever encountered in her 15 years of service. The object appearing on her screen was massive. Not just large, but impossibly large. Lisa quickly calculated the dimensions and then recalculated them because the numbers seemed wrong. The ship was approximately 3 kilometers long and had a shape that reminded her of a butterfly, with broad wings that extended from a narrow central body. The surface seemed to shift and change colors as she watched it, cycling through shades of silver, blue, and purple. Lisa activated the emergency alert without hesitation. Within minutes, the command center was filled with personnel. General Robert Harrison arrived with his usual gruff demeanor, immediately demanding information. Lisa provided the coordinates, the size estimate, and the trajectory of the approaching vessel. One of the key observations was that the ship was not accelerating in any aggressive manner. Its speed was constant, and its path would bring it into orbit around Earth in approximately 2 hours. General Harrison picked up the communication device with a hand that trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. He contacted the World Security Council, which had been established after many nations agreed to create a unified response system for potential alien contact. The council had been formed 5 years ago, but most people thought it was just a theoretical organization that would never actually need to do anything. Now it was suddenly very real and very necessary. Ambassador David Fletcher received the call while he was having dinner with his wife in downtown Washington. He was the chief negotiator for the United Nations and had spent decades studying linguistics, psychology, and diplomatic protocols. He had even taken a course on alien contact procedures, though he had been somewhat skeptical about its necessity at the time. His wife, Margaret, watched as his face changed color and he set down his fork. 2 hours later, David was on a military aircraft headed to Kepler Station. He spent the flight reviewing information about the approaching ship and trying to calm his racing mind. In all his years of preparation, nothing had truly prepared him for this moment. Humanity was about to make first contact with an alien civilization, and he was the one who would represent all of humanity in that initial meeting. When David arrived at the station, Lisa greeted him in the observation deck. Together they watched the alien ship enter Earth's orbit with a grace that seemed almost impossible for an object of such size. It moved like a dancer, smooth and controlled. There were no jerky movements, no signs of malfunction or instability. Whoever was piloting that ship knew exactly what they were doing. The communication frequencies suddenly came alive with a signal. It was not in any language that the station's computers recognized, but it was clearly intentional. Lisa ordered the tech team to begin recording and analyzing the pattern. Within minutes, the computer had processed the signal and converted it into text. The message was simple and profound. We come in peace and wish to establish contact with the leadership of your world. David's hands shook slightly as he prepared to respond. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times in his head, but the reality was far more overwhelming than any simulation. He activated the communication system and began to speak, welcoming the visitors and expressing humanity's peaceful intentions. The response came quickly. The alien ship requested to establish a visual communication link. Lisa quickly confirmed that the technical infrastructure was in place, and seconds later, the view screen came alive with an image that would forever change humanity's understanding of what was possible in the universe. 3 figures stood on the alien vessel's deck, and they were not what anyone had expected. In all the science fiction stories, all the movies and books, humans had imagined aliens in countless ways. Some were depicted as monsters with tentacles and teeth. Others were described as gray beings with large eyes and small bodies. But no one had quite imagined what humanity now saw. The 3 beings were female in appearance, with features that somehow felt familiar and completely alien at the same time. Their skin had a crystalline quality, appearing to shift between silver and deep blue depending on how the light touched it. Their eyes were large and luminous, colored in shades of emerald green and violet. Their hair flowed as if it were underwater, moving with a grace that suggested they controlled each strand consciously. They wore clothing that seemed to be made from light itself, flowing and changing colors and patterns that seemed to convey meaning. The being in the center stepped forward slightly. When she spoke, her voice came through the speakers with perfect clarity but with an unusual harmonic quality. The words were in English, though with an accent that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She introduced herself as Zara, representative of the Vex Collective from the Andromeda Galaxy. She said her companions were Kessa and Nira, and together they had been chosen to make first contact with humanity. Zara explained that her people had been observing Earth for a very long time, and had decided that the time had come for open communication. David found himself standing up straighter, his training kicking in. He introduced himself and offered formal greetings on behalf of all the nations of Earth. He asked if the Vex Collective had peaceful intentions and what they hoped to achieve through this contact. Zara smiled, and the expression was so genuinely warm and kind that David felt some of his anxiety begin to fade. She said that the Vex Collective believed in cooperation between species and that humanity was ready to join a larger community of worlds. She said that they had much to share and much to learn from each other. As David and Zara began their initial conversation, Lisa watched from her station. She noticed that Kessa and Nira were observing not just David but the entire command center. They seemed to be assessing, learning, understanding everything about how humans functioned in crisis situations. Their eyes moved with purpose and intelligence. This was only the beginning. The first contact had been made, and Earth would never be the same again. In the hours and days that followed, humanity would face questions it had never considered before. What did it mean to join a community of worlds? What would Earth have to give up? What could humanity gain? And most importantly, could humanity trust these three remarkable women from another galaxy who seemed to know so much about human nature already? The world watched in awe as news of the alien contact spread like wildfire across every communication channel. Within hours, the story had reached every corner of Earth. Some people celebrated with joy and wonder. Others panicked, fearing that invasion or destruction was coming. Governments held emergency meetings while military forces went on alert. Scientists demanded more information while religious leaders debated the theological implications. David Fletcher stood in the secure conference room of Kepler Station, reviewing the initial conversation with Zara. The recording had been analyzed by linguists, psychologists, and experts from every relevant field. The consensus was that Zara had spoken with absolute sincerity. She had not made any demands or threats. She had simply stated facts and invited dialogue. Lisa Morrison prepared the diplomatic quarters aboard the station for the arrival of the three alien representatives. The room was designed to be neutral and welcoming, with comfortable seating and refreshment stations. Lisa made sure that the technology throughout the room could accommodate any potential needs of the visitors. She also made certain that there were backup systems in case the Vex technology interfered with Earth's electronics. When Zara,
Kessa and Nira arrived at the diplomatic quarters.
They moved with such natural grace that they seemed to glide across the floor. Zara observed everything with obvious interest, her luminous eyes taking in every detail of the room, the equipment, and the human personnel present. She approached Lisa and extended her hand in the traditional Earth greeting. The gesture showed that the aliens had studied human customs thoroughly. Lisa took Zara's hand and felt a slight warmth, almost like touching silk that had been gently warmed by sunlight. The alien woman's grip was firm but not threatening. Zara's smile was genuine, conveying respect and genuine curiosity. David began by asking the question that was on the minds of leaders across the world. Why had the Vex Collective chosen this moment to make contact with Earth? Why not come earlier or wait even longer? Zara seated herself with elegant poise and began to explain. She said that civilizations developed through stages, and humanity had reached a critical stage. Humanity possessed the technology to destroy itself, but was only beginning to develop the wisdom to avoid doing so. The Vex Collective believed that contact at this precise moment could help accelerate humanity's development toward a more peaceful and stable society. Waiting longer might mean arriving too late. Kessa added information about the Vex collective's structure and values. She explained that their civilization had been guided by principles of cooperation and mutual benefit for thousands of years. They had learned through trial and error that competition and domination only led to suffering. They had discovered that sharing knowledge and resources benefited all species in the long term. Nira presented data on the state of Earth's environment and social structures. Her information was so detailed and accurate that David realized the Vex had been conducting sophisticated surveillance for far longer than they had initially indicated. Nira showed statistics about pollution, poverty, disease, and conflict, but she presented this information not with judgment, but with compassion. She emphasized that these problems were not unique to humanity and that many species had faced similar challenges. David asked a more direct question. What did the Vex Collective want in exchange for sharing their knowledge and technology? There had to be some condition or requirement. In David's experience, nothing was given freely without expectation of return. Zara seemed pleased by the question. She said that David's skepticism was wise and showed good judgment. She explained that the collective did indeed have requirements. First, Earth would need to commit to resolving its internal conflicts peacefully. Wars and military conflicts would not be acceptable within the collective. Second, humanity would need to agree to ethical standards regarding the treatment of all living things. Third, Earth would become part of a larger community and would need to contribute to the defense and welfare of that community. David's mind raced through the implications. What would happen if Earth refused these conditions? What if some nations refused but others accepted? What kind of authority would the Vex have to enforce these requirements? Kessa seemed to anticipate David's concerns. She explained that the Vex Collective did not force any species to join. If humanity refused the offer, the collective would simply leave and allow humanity to develop on its own timeline. However, Kessa added a warning. There were other forces in the galaxy that were not as peaceful and cooperative as the Vex. If Earth remained isolated and weak, it might eventually encounter these hostile forces. The Vex Alliance provided protection and security. Lisa asked a question that was practical and direct. She wanted to know what kinds of technology the Vex could share. What could they actually offer that would make a difference to humanity? Nira's response was stunning. She listed advances in medicine that could eliminate cancer, heart disease, and most infectious illnesses within a decade. She described energy technology that would provide unlimited clean power. She presented information on agricultural innovations that could end world hunger. She explained communication technology that would allow all humans to understand each other instantaneously, regardless of language. The list went on and on. The room fell silent. The implications of even one of these technologies would be transformative for human civilization. The prospect of all of them seemed almost impossible to imagine. David asked to confer with the World Security Council before proceeding further. The three alien women agreed gracefully, saying they understood that such decisions required careful consideration. They said they would wait in orbit, patient and ready to continue discussions whenever humanity was prepared. As Zara stood to leave, she placed a small object on the table in front of David. She said it was a gift and a demonstration of good faith. The object appeared to be made of crystalline material, and it glowed softly with an inner light. Zara explained that it was a medical sample device that could diagnose any human illness. She suggested that David have a medical team examine it and test it. She was confident that humanity would quickly understand its value. Lisa watched the three women leave the diplomatic quarters and return to their ship. She found herself marveling at their confidence, their composure, and their apparent lack of concern about how humanity might react. They seemed certain that eventually, humanity would choose to join them. David spent the next hours on communications with world leaders. The reactions were mixed. Some leaders wanted to accept immediately and gain the technological advantages. Others wanted to refuse the conditions, fearing the loss of national sovereignty. Some suggested trying to capture the alien ship and extract its secrets by force. But this last suggestion was quickly rejected when military analysts calculated that the Vex vessel was so technologically superior that any human attack would be futile. The debate raged across the planet. News networks ran special programs analyzing every word that had been spoken. Scientists speculated about the nature of the proposed technologies. Politicians argued about what conditions Earth could accept and what conditions it must reject. Meanwhile, aboard the alien ship in orbit above Earth, 3 remarkable women watched and waited. They had made their offer. Now they would see if humanity was ready to step into a larger universe and embrace a different future. The medical device that Zara had left behind became the center of intense study at every major hospital and research facility across Earth. Scientists worked around the clock analyzing the object, trying to understand how it functioned. Within 48 hours, they had made a breakthrough. The device could indeed diagnose any illness instantly by analyzing a single drop of blood. Moreover, it provided detailed treatment protocols with unprecedented accuracy. The implications were staggering. Hospitals began using the device, and within days, thousands of patients received accurate diagnoses for conditions that had previously been mysterious. Doctors who had worked for decades treating patients suddenly understood that they had been working with incomplete knowledge. The alien technology was not just advanced, it was revolutionary. Public opinion began to shift dramatically. People who had feared the alien arrival now demanded that governments accept the Vex offer. Scientists were ecstatic at the prospect of accessing more advanced knowledge. Religious leaders, after much deliberation, declared that accepting help from alien species did not contradict their faith. Only a few governments held firm on their resistance, and their position became increasingly difficult to maintain, as their own citizens demanded they reconsider. David Fletcher prepared for a second round of negotiations. This time he was not alone. A delegation had been assembled that included military leaders, politicians, scientists, and economists. Together, they represented the interests of humanity's major powers and regions. They also included Lisa Morrison, whose reputation for clear thinking and careful analysis had made her valuable to the negotiation team. When the delegation arrived aboard the Vex ship, they were amazed by what they saw. The interior of the vessel was vast and filled with technology that seemed almost alive. Walls glowed with soft light that seemed to come from within the material itself. The air was perfectly conditioned, neither too warm nor too cold. There were gardens growing plants that none of the humans recognized, and fountains with water that appeared to flow upward as well as downward. Zara greeted them in a large central chamber. She introduced the humans to several other Vex, all of whom were female and held positions of authority. There were scientists, military commanders, and administrators. As the humans interacted with these Vex representatives, they began to understand the structure of the alien civilization. Unlike Earth, where power was distributed among different genders and sometimes concentrated in the hands of a few individuals, the Vex civilization was built on a foundation of female leadership and cooperative decision-making. One of the human delegates, a military general named Harrison, asked directly why all the Vex leaders appeared to be female. Was there no equality in their civilization? Zara answered with great patience. She explained that the Vex had discovered long ago that civilizations led by women made different choices than those led exclusively by men. Women leaders tended to prioritize the survival and welfare of the entire community, rather than expansion and conquest. Over 5,000 years, the Vex had gradually shifted toward female leadership, not because they denied opportunities to males, but because they had observed that this structure led to more stable and peaceful societies. Males participated in all aspects of society and culture, but strategic and political decisions were guided primarily by female wisdom. This explanation sparked intense debate among the human delegation. Some found it offensive to the concept of gender equality. Others suggested that perhaps there was something to learn from a civilization that had achieved such stability and peace over such a long period of time. The negotiations moved into substance. The Vex presented more detailed information about their conditions for membership. In addition to the previous requirements, they explained that Earth would need to adopt certain environmental protection standards. Additionally, Earth would need to agree to share in the collective's defense obligations. This meant that if another member species came under attack, Earth would be expected to provide military support. General Harrison immediately objected. He said that Earth could not commit to military action in distant parts of the galaxy. The logistics alone would be impossible. The distance between worlds was too great, and human technology could not support such an effort. Kessa smiled and presented data showing human space travel capabilities. She then explained that the Vex would provide Earth with advanced propulsion systems that could reduce travel time between star systems from years to weeks. With this technology, human military forces could reach any location in the collective's territory within reasonable timeframes. The humans would not be doing the defending alone, but would be fighting alongside fleets from dozens of other civilizations. Lisa asked a crucial question. She wanted to know what would happen if Earth violated the terms of the agreement. If humanity broke the peace conditions or failed to meet the environmental standards, what consequences would result? Nira presented this information with obvious care. She explained that the collective had mechanisms for addressing violations. First, there would be warnings and opportunities to correct the problem. If a species continued to violate the terms, the collective would impose sanctions. These could include trade restrictions or temporary loss of access to certain technologies. In the most extreme cases, if a species posed a genuine threat to the collective, military action might be taken. However, Nira emphasized that in 5,000 years of the collective's existence, this had never happened. Civilizations understood the benefits of cooperation and chose to maintain peace. The human delegation took a break to confer among themselves. In private meetings, they discussed the implications of what they had learned. The military leadership remained skeptical, but acknowledged that the technology on offer was too valuable to refuse. The scientists were enthusiastic. The politicians worried about sovereignty, but recognized that joining the collective might actually improve humanity's long-term prospects. Lisa found herself in a quiet observation area aboard the ship, looking out at Earth below. It was her home, the world she had sworn to protect. She wondered what joining the collective would mean for the planet and its people. Would they lose their identity? Would they be forced to abandon their cultures and values? Zara appeared beside her, moving so silently that Lisa did not notice her arrival until she spoke. The alien woman said she understood Lisa's concerns. She said that every species that joined the collective had worried about losing their identity. But what they discovered was that joining did not mean losing who they were. It meant expanding their sense of community and belonging to something larger. Humans could maintain their cultures, languages, and traditions, while also becoming part of something greater. Lisa asked Zara a personal question. She wanted to know why the Vex seemed so patient and kind in their approach to this negotiation. If they possessed such superior technology, why not simply take what they wanted from Earth? Zara's response was profound. She said that true power was not measured in weapons or technology, but in wisdom and compassion. Taking what you wanted from others created enemies and conflict, but offering freely and allowing others to choose created allies in peace. The Vex had learned this lesson over thousands of years, and it had served them well. As Lisa looked at Zara's luminous eyes, she found herself believing in what the alien woman was saying. Perhaps humanity was ready for this step. Perhaps the future could be different from the past. Perhaps the arrival of 3 remarkable women from another galaxy was the beginning of a new chapter for all of humanity. The world held its breath as the negotiation progressed into its second week. The discussions had moved beyond theoretical considerations into practical agreements. Lawyers drafted documents in multiple languages. Scientists prepared protocols for the exchange of knowledge. Military strategists began working with Vex commanders on security procedures. But beneath the surface of these productive discussions, doubt and fear were growing. A group of political leaders who opposed the agreement began organizing resistance. They held press conferences arguing that joining the collective would mean the end of national sovereignty. They warned that the Vex were engaging in a sophisticated deception, preparing humanity for conquest. They spread rumors that the advanced technology offered by the Vex might be harmful to human development, creating dependence and weakening human innovation. Some religious organizations added their voices to the opposition. They argued that accepting technology from aliens was hubris, and that humanity should solve its own problems without outside intervention. They questioned whether the Vex could be trusted and whether their version of peace was simply a disguise for manipulation. David Fletcher found himself facing increasingly difficult questions during his press conferences. How could he guarantee that the Vex would keep their promises? What if the environmental standards they demanded were too restrictive? What if the collective later demanded more from Earth than had been initially agreed? Inside Kepler Station, Lisa Morrison watched the opposition movement grow with concern. She knew that the decision about joining the collective would ultimately rest not with the negotiators or even the leaders, but with the people of Earth. Public opinion would be crucial. Zara requested a private meeting with David, Lisa, and General Harrison. The three alien women had observed the growing opposition movement through their monitoring of Earth's communications. They understood the source of the concern and wanted to address it directly. In the diplomatic chamber, Zara began by acknowledging that doubt and skepticism were natural responses to such a major decision. She said that the Vex expected resistance and did not take it as a personal offense. She then offered a proposal. Zara suggested that instead of continuing to negotiate through official channels, the collective would allow small groups of humans to visit the ship and spend extended time learning about Vex civilization firsthand. These delegates could come from different nations, different belief systems, and different political perspectives. They would see with their own eyes that the Vex were genuine in their intentions. David was hesitant. He suggested that this could create complications and confusion. Some of the visiting humans might report back with distorted or biased information. Kessa replied that they understood the risk, but she believed that most humans, when confronted with truth directly, would recognize it. She believed that people fundamentally wanted peace and cooperation, even if some leaders told them otherwise. The proposal was accepted, and within days, groups of human visitors were boarding the Vex ship. Journalists, scientists, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens spent hours exploring the alien vessel. They attended lectures on Vex history and science. They sampled Vex food and experienced Vex culture. Most importantly, they had conversations with Zara, Kessa, and Nira about what joining the collective would truly mean. The visitors returned to Earth with stories of wonder and amazement. They described the beauty of the Vex ship and the genuine kindness of the aliens, but more importantly, they described the absence of weapons and the peaceful nature of everything they had seen. Journalists published accounts that the mainstream media had initially dismissed began to gain credibility as these eyewitness reports accumulated. However, not all of the reports were positive. Some visitors returned troubled, warning that the Vex way of life was too restrictive. They had been shown cities where conflict had been eliminated, but some described this as the elimination of human freedom. They argued that conflict and competition were natural aspects of human nature and that the Vex were asking humans to deny fundamental aspects of who they were. These contrasting reports created confusion among the public. Some people were inspired by the vision of a peaceful universe. Others were frightened by the prospect of losing the freedoms they had always known. The debate became increasingly heated and divisive. It was at this critical moment that something unexpected happened. A major leader, the President of the United States, came forward with a public statement. He had secretly visited the Vex ship and spent hours in conversation with Zara. He explained to the world that after this meeting, he was convinced that the Vex offer was genuine and that joining the collective was in humanity's best interest. He acknowledged the concerns about sovereignty and freedom, but he argued that a peace that stretched across multiple worlds was worth the compromises that would be necessary to achieve it. This statement did not resolve all opposition, but it shifted the balance of public opinion significantly. If one of the world's most powerful leaders could be convinced, perhaps the Vex could be trusted. General Harrison remained deeply skeptical. He requested a private meeting with Zara, and during this meeting he voiced his fundamental concern. He said that every military strategist understood that the greatest threat was not from obvious enemies, but from allies who possessed superior technology and could turn that technology against you at any moment. How could any rational military leader accept such a risk? Zara's response was careful and thoughtful. She said that General Harrison's concern was valid and showed the kind of careful thinking that had kept humanity alive. She acknowledged that there was always a risk when entering into any agreement with another party. But she argued that the true risk to humanity was not from the Vex but from isolation and stagnation. She asked the general a difficult question. If the Vex had hostile intentions, why would they not simply attack Earth now, when humanity could offer no effective resistance? The fact that they were engaging in negotiation and offering technology was itself evidence of their peaceful intentions. The general had no adequate response to this logic, though he remained troubled. As the negotiations entered their third week, a general consensus began to emerge among humanity's leaders. The majority position was that joining the collective was the wise choice. Even those who remained skeptical acknowledged that the potential benefits outweighed the risks. Nations that had always been at odds with each other found themselves in agreement on this fundamental question. For the first time in human history, the world seemed united by a common vision of the future. Lisa Morrison found herself becoming an unofficial ambassador between the human and Vex delegations. She moved easily between the two worlds, understanding the concerns and perspectives of both sides. She had come to deeply respect Zara and the other Vex leaders, but she also understood the legitimate anxieties of her own species. One evening, Lisa sat with Zara aboard the alien ship, watching Earth rotate below them. Lisa asked Zara what would happen if humanity ultimately rejected the offer and refused to join the collective. Zara's response was simple and honest. She said that the Vex would leave peacefully and wish humanity well, but she also said something that conveyed both sadness and hope. She said that she believed humanity would make the right choice, because beneath all the fear and doubt, humans possessed an innate desire for peace and connection. The three alien women had come to Earth not to conquer or control, but simply to help humanity see its own potential. The final vote took place in the General Assembly of the United Nations, on a clear morning in late spring. Every nation on Earth had sent representatives, and the proceedings were broadcast live to billions of people across the planet. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation, knowing that this decision would shape human civilization for generations to come. David Fletcher stood before the assembly and presented the final negotiated agreement. He spoke about the opportunities that awaited humanity in the Vex collective. He acknowledged the concerns and uncertainties but argued that the potential for peace, advancement, and cooperation outweighed the risks. He called upon the nations of Earth to vote for a future of hope rather than fear. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some leaders spoke passionately in favor of the agreement, describing the medical technologies that would save countless lives and the environmental solutions that could heal Earth's damaged ecosystems. Others raised concerns about sovereignty and the loss of Earth's independence. A few continued to warn that the Vex were engaged in elaborate deception, but the overwhelming sentiment among the delegates was positive. Nation after nation rose to express support for joining the collective. When the vote was finally called, the result was definitive. 187 nations voted in favor of joining the Vex collective. Only 3 nations abstained, choosing to maintain their neutrality but not opposing the decision. As the result was announced, celebration erupted throughout the assembly hall. People stood and applauded. Some wept with joy at the prospect of a new future. Screens throughout the world showed the same scenes, and cities everywhere filled with celebrations as billions of humans recognized that something fundamental had changed. Lisa Morrison was aboard Kepler Station when the vote results came through. She immediately contacted Zara to share the news. The response came quickly and with evident warmth. Zara requested that she, Kessa, and Nira be allowed to make a final public address to humanity before the formal integration process began. Within hours, a broadcast was arranged. Zara appeared on screens across the planet, her luminous eyes reflecting the light as she addressed all of humanity. She spoke of her admiration for the human species and their journey toward wisdom. She acknowledged humanity's flaws and struggles, but emphasized that every species encountered similar challenges. She welcomed humanity to the Vex collective and promised that the Vex would share all the knowledge and resources they had committed to provide. Zara made a particularly powerful statement that captured the essence of what the agreement meant. She said that the universe was vast and often lonely, with countless worlds separated by impossible distances and different forms of life unable to communicate. But when connection was established between peoples, when understanding could be achieved across the vast gulf of species and culture, something precious was created. She said that humanity had just stepped into a universe where they were no longer alone. After Zara finished speaking, Kessa and Nira each offered brief remarks. Kessa spoke about the scientific collaboration that would soon begin, describing how humans and Vex could advance knowledge together in ways neither species could achieve alone. Nira spoke about the responsibility that came with membership in the collective, emphasizing that joining meant becoming part of a family of species committed to each other's welfare and security. The formal integration process began immediately. Teams of Vex scientists, doctors, and engineers began working with their human counterparts to establish protocols for technology transfer. Medical teams started treating patients using the advanced Vex technology. Environmental specialists began designing solutions for Earth's ecological problems. Educators developed programs to teach humans about other member species of the collective. General Harrison supervised the military integration with the kind of careful attention that had made him a respected commander. He found that Vex military strategists were willing to listen to human perspectives and valued the insights that human military history provided. Gradually, his deep skepticism gave way to a more cautious acceptance of the reality of the partnership. Lisa Morrison found herself promoted to the position of Earth's representative to the Vex Collective's Central Council. It was a role of enormous responsibility, but she felt prepared for it. She had spent weeks learning about Vex history and culture, and she had developed a deep respect for Zara's wisdom and patience. One day, as Lisa was working in her new office at the Kepler station, she received a message that Zara wished to see her. Lisa made her way to the diplomatic quarters, where she found Zara looking at images of Earth displayed on a transparent wall. Zara greeted her warmly and asked how Lisa was adjusting to her new role. Lisa replied honestly that it was challenging but fascinating. She asked Zara why she had requested this meeting. Zara turned from the images and looked directly at Lisa. She said that she wanted Lisa to understand something about what had transpired. Zara explained that the Vex Collective had not come to Earth to save humanity or to control them. They had come because they recognized in humans the same potential they had once seen in themselves. The Vex had spent thousands of years learning to live in peace and cooperation, and they wanted to share that knowledge with younger species who were standing at the crossroads between conflict and harmony. Zara said that humanity's decision to join the collective had been exactly what she had hoped for. But she also said that the true work was just beginning. It would take time for humans and Vex to truly understand each other. There would be difficulties and misunderstandings. But Zara believed that the commitment had been made, and both species would work through any challenges that arose. Lisa asked Zara what she hoped for humanity in the coming centuries. Zara's response reflected her deep philosophical nature. She said she hoped that humans would grow beyond their current limitations, not through abandoning who they were, but through expanding their sense of community and connection. She hoped that future humans would look back at this moment, not as the day humanity was conquered or forced into compliance, but as the day humanity chose to grow and embrace a larger destiny. As Lisa left the meeting, she carried with her a sense of purpose and hope. The future stretched before her and before all of humanity, vast and full of possibilities. The arrival of 3 remarkable women from another galaxy had catalyzed a change that would echo through human history forever. Weeks turned into months, and then into years. The technologies that the Vex had promised were integrated into human civilization. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were eradicated. Clean energy replaced fossil fuels. Environmental damage was slowly repaired. Wars ceased as nations realized they were now part of a larger community that valued peace. But beyond the technological advancement, something more fundamental changed in the human spirit. People began to see Earth not as separate nations in competition, but as a single world with a single destiny. They looked up at the stars no longer with fear or wonder alone, but with recognition that somewhere out there were brothers and sisters in civilization, united in commitment to peace and cooperation. Lisa often stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station looking at the stars. She thought of Zara and the vision she had presented. She thought of the risk that humanity had taken in trusting 3 alien women who had appeared from the darkness of space. But as she looked at Earth below, at a world that was being healed, at a civilization that had chosen peace over conflict, Lisa knew that it had been the right choice. The day the Vex Collective formally welcomed Earth as a full member, Lisa stood beside Zara as the collective's leadership acknowledged humanity's entry. Zara looked at Lisa with evident satisfaction and said that Lisa had helped bridge the gap between 2 species. She said that Lisa was the beginning of a new kind of human, one who could stand in both worlds and help her people understand the larger universe. And so humanity stepped forward into a new era, guided by the wisdom of Zara and her people, ready to discover what it truly meant to be part of a community of worlds united in peace and cooperation.